Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us for the first time to Unraveling the Mystery of AAC. This is part 3. We're going to talk about matching systems to needs. I'm Heather Prenevo, and I'm here with my lovely co-host.
I'm Courtney Mayholtz.
So why are we here for part 3? So if you could chat out in the window ABC, what brought you here today? Is it you've assessed your student or your client, or your child's been assessed for communication and access needs, but now what do we do next? Is it I'm not familiar with very many AAC apps or devices, and I'm not sure, what should I be trialing? Or is it I'm not sure what features will match my student or my client or my child so that I can start a trial? Or is it a combination, or I need a refresher? I saw, yep.
Mostly B's and C's though. A and C.
Okay.
Rachel, I feel like you have answered A, B, and C previously too, which is okay.
I love it. I'm kind of, when I go to a training, it's often like, yes, that's me. Oh, good.
Oh, now we're getting lots of them. Courtney's an A, B, and C. I like it.
Very, very good. Well, we're hoping that you're gonna all get some information to help answer those questions from part 3 and or more of our sessions today. So here's our agenda for our session right now. We're going to talk about feature matching. That's kind of like this big ominous thing that we hear about. What is it? And what does that look like when we are trying to figure out what we're going to trial? We're going to look at PRC and Saltillo solutions, and we're going to look at kind of those next steps. So now that you've started to match features, where do you go with it? That next word that we all hear, trial, what does that look like? So we'll talk about that in our next session. And obviously we'll have time at the end for questions, but please use that chat window throughout this session. I'm going to turn off our cameras. There we go. Learning objectives you can see on the screen here. We're going to cover lots of good information in this next hour and a half. Same note icons that you've seen in the previous ones, or if this is your first Unraveling the Mystery session for today, there is an icon for a notes handout. So when we mentioned on the AAC learning journey where you can find the handouts, there's a notes handout. This is where you're able to jot down notes. We've got key points already listed on there, so you don't have to frantically scribble. We don't do the slides notes pages just because Courtney and I are both like, you know what? That's a lot to look back through. And again, you're frantically trying to scribble things down. So key information on there, spots for you to jot things down though. There's also what we call a tools handout. In there are going to be copies of checklists or documents that you can use and later refer to, make copies of, share with your friends. Please use them as you see fit. And then anything that is on a website that you could go and find, some type of online resource. We'll have a link provided in your handouts and in the PowerPoint here, and that'll be denoted with that little computer screen there.
And I feel like we should just mention it again.
Yeah.
We had quite a few requests last time. So, Heather said we don't share the slides, but if there's a slide or two that you want, let us know and we can definitely get you a copy of that, an image of that.
Very, very true. All right, so we're going to talk about feature matching. You probably all heard of this when it comes to AAC, but what does it really mean? We're going to talk about, we gathered up all this information that we've been looking at with our assessments regarding our students' needs, and we want to see how those match up with AAC system features. So we're going to try to give you a process that you can use to do that.
Yeah, and you can think of it kind of as putting all the assessment pieces into this funnel, right? And seeing what AAC system might work best for our client and move to, maybe start our trials with that. What we want to think about with feature matching is using all those tools that we've talked about previously. So the participation model, that SET framework, maybe you're using the ALP, pragmatics profile. Even thinking about those communicative competencies, we want to use all of that data that we have gathered or and assessed and really funnel that down to give us a starting point. Now that might not be the final answer, right? But at least it's a starting point. And that really is the goal of feature matching.
Very good. And it might not just be one that comes out the funnel. You could have two, you could have five.
Yep.
So in the tools handout, you're going to find this form that you can use to pull this information together. And as Courtney said, we talked about 4 tools that you could use, but you also maybe have your evaluations from school or outside agencies, and we can pull all that into one form. These are those features that you're going to be looking at in those AAC systems that you want to trial. So this is just a nice way to get all that information together and look at in one spot the access, primary message formulation, size, durability, portability, positioning, the integration. We talked about a little bit in the last one. If it's a dedicated device or app-based, we need to look at all those options. Here's a spot to maybe make note of those funding sources, just in case, as we mentioned, there might be things to consider with different funding sources. And a spot of what features are you prioritizing for this individual? What do we want to make sure our system has? And take some notes on it.
So one of the biggest things that we want you to remember as you go through this feature matching process is that one size does not fit all, right? There is not a single AAC system out there that is going to be best for all users. All of the systems have different pros and cons for individual users. So you really cannot take this one size fits all approach. I get really concerned when I hear about schools or walk into a classroom and all of the kids are on the same system, on the same AAC system, because there are individual differences in the systems, just like there are individual differences in our AAC learners. You know, we want to, yes, we want the communication partners to really understand and use the systems and really be supporting the learners in that classroom, but it should not be a deciding factor in which system you try with your learner. We want to find what meets the needs of our complex communicators the best. So when we think about devices and which devices we are going to trial, we want to remember that there are multiple ways to get to that decision, right? To narrow things down. So just keep that in mind and take into consideration that one device or app might not meet all of their needs. So thinking about one that meets more of their needs is going to be a good place to start. So some of the things that we were going to consider starting with would be things like voice output, right? We would also want to think about access needs. If we have an individual using a specific method, that might not be available on all the systems. And we'll see later it's not. Message formulation. How are they going to formulate their messages? What's going to be important and the best type of system for them? And how is that organized? We'll also want to think about portability and size. There are quite a range of differences in terms of device size and weight and things like that. And those features, and durability as well is a big factor to consider.
Also, just keeping in mind that an app versus a dedicated device. Some do really well with an app on an iPad. Some really need that dedicated device for various reasons. The funding source, we can't stress that enough. Make sure that it's going to be covered. There are some funding sources, or it has to be bundled into a dedicated device for it to be covered. And we also point out training and support. PRC Saltillo provides training and support for the life of that device. So if that is something that's going to be crucial for the success of your individual, ask those questions of other consultants and vendors that you're working with too.
Yeah, and so one of the first things that you want to look at, and we mentioned earlier on our slide, is this idea of voice output or no voice. So as you're looking at what systems might benefit your AAC learner or the needs of your client, you really want to, this should be one of those first things is, does it need voice output? You know, some students for having a manual communication board or a flip book, as you can see on the screen here with more options, could meet their needs, and they don't need voice output. Maybe that's enough to support their communication and language. But if voice output will help them communicate in more situations, then you should really consider trialing some systems with voice output.
And I can vividly remember a young woman that was verbal, unintelligible to a lot of people, but she did great with something like a little flip book or a card that had some key words and phrases to get context with, and then she was understood by others. So she did not need a voice output, nor did she want. I mean, it was considered. she did not want.
Yeah.
So got to look at all the options.
Sure do.
Next, we're going to consider those access barriers to AAC. We don't want to be limiting what's on the AAC based on that access. If they're able to use a pointer finger and access a touch screen successfully, direct selection is what we want to look at. Maybe they aren't super accurate with selecting that button on the screen, and then we could look at a key guard or a touch guide. So on the bottom row there, you see the clear touch guide and the black key guard. Bigger holes, smaller holes, whatever is going to help them be more accurate to select the buttons on the screen. Maybe they need an alternative form of access. Maybe they're going to use one or two switches to access it. Maybe they use their head to access the switch. I had a young man who used his knee to access the switch. We can look at all those different access points. On the left, had to do my right and left, sorry. On the left in the top row, you see a head mouse. So maybe using a reflective dot for head tracking, or on the iPad Pro devices we'll talk about, there is the ability to do head tracking without the reflective dot, and it's tracking your face. So did they have that head movement and can use it to access the buttons on the screen? And then we also have an eye gaze or an eye tracker that is going to track your eyes. So maybe they don't have that head movement, but they have the range and eye movement to track on the screen. All of those are possibilities for accessing communication and keeping that in mind.
Yeah, and we also want to start thinking about the child or the client's language and communication skills as well. Often systems now are set up by how the messages are formulated, and the vast majority of systems these days, I think we finally turned the corner, have a combination of methods for message generation or formulation, right? We realize that core words are great, but there are also uses for phrases being stored, or sentences being stored, or even specialty features and pages within a vocabulary or a system, for message formulation. And so when you're matching, features to your needs, you want to determine, what is the way that the student is currently communicating and where you would like to see them get to in the next 3 to 5 years. And that can really help you start to narrow down, when you're looking and comparing these systems, what might be the best way to go.
And we'll be talking in part 4, because we get that question a lot of, well, right now they're mainly doing like phrases and sentences with like a switch or a Big Mac. So that's where we should start on a AAC device with robust vocabulary. It's like, that's where they're at right now, but where do we want to get them? We don't want to like keep them
Right.
limited to this. And so we often get asked, like, what vocabulary file should I be starting with? So we'll talk about that in part 4, but just keeping this kind of multi-Venn diagram, I guess. All the circles, they're all in there, right? Next, you're going to look at that device size and screen size. This is super important. Weight of the device comes into play with this too. We always ask, are there any vision concerns? Are there any fine motor concerns? Is it going to be beneficial to have that bigger screen so that I can have more buttons say for instance, on that 14-inch screen you see on the side there, if I'm aiming for this 84 location layout, and if I have a bigger screen, they're going to be able to access it better than say on a 5-inch screen. That's going to provide them more vocabulary. Let's keep that in mind. On the flip side, if motor is a concern, we were talking about if they have that head movement or that eye movement, is that really big screen going to hinder them accessing the top left corner and the bottom right corner, right? Another way of looking at it, and I love the story that I heard from a coworker where there were vision concerns. Access was going to be 2-switch scanning with auditory prompts. They were not looking at the screen. Their vision, was not a strength. They're not looking at the screen. They're listening for the auditory prompts and using the switches. So they actually went with a 5-inch NovaChat that you see there, and it was hanging off of the wheelchairs, like not even in their visual field, because that wasn't needed, versus having a 14-inch screen mounted to their wheelchair, taking up more real estate on their chair. So we got to look at it from all perspectives that way. When we're talking about being able to transport or having it mounted, are we using it on a mount on a wheelchair or on a table stand? That might play a factor too in what size screen we're using. All of that will help you, looking at all those different things and talking through with teams. Courtney mentioned in the previous session that idea of, knowing we need it on a wheelchair, but if they're not in their wheelchair all the time, do we need a table stand? Do we need a way for them to access it when they're on the floor, or they're in a recliner, or in their stander? Just kind of those environmental pieces, right?
Mm-hmm. We also need to consider that durability piece, and there's a lot of different reasons for this depending on the client and the population, but when we're working with younger children or kids, even with maybe low muscle tone, we always want to think about how durable is the device in the case. Will it be able to withstand bumping into things, and maybe some of that what could be considered clumsiness, right, as they develop and fine-tune skills. So we want to make sure that whatever system we're providing them with is going to be durable enough to make it through the long haul, so that they're not constantly having to, send it in for repairs or rely on a backup system. We want to make sure we're picking something that is going to meet their daily needs for communication. You could also think about this with other populations. Do they tend to throw the device when they get frustrated, or, for maybe it's not a communication reason, maybe it's something else. I had a client one time where the mom was so happy because they had just upgraded from, one system to another. But this kiddo had a tendency to toss the device, and the window broke, but the device screen was still intact. So that was it was a huge thing for this mom, that like when we were going through that process, it was much more durable. So you really want to make sure that you're thinking about durability and asking about it as you are funneling things down through this feature matching process.
Definitely. Next, we know that the ease of getting access to an AAC app, especially during AAC Awareness Month, makes it super great option for some teams. We know that there's a lot of families that feel like maybe they don't have access to an SLP that can help them with this process, or they just want to get started, and getting an app going on the App Store. Great. We often hear that the process to get a dedicated device is so much longer, it's so much harder, that just going and buying an app and putting it on the family's iPad is going to meet their needs. So some things to consider, though, when we're looking at which option makes the most sense for your child, your student, your client. Do any of the above features that we already talked about need to be addressed? One thing, Courtney and I help answer questions on our Facebook groups, and we often will hear, this student or this child has gone through 3 iPad screens in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Durability is kind of key, right? So maybe we need something a little more durable, or key guards. Sometimes the way key guards are laid out, there's lots of options out there, but getting them lined up just on your iPad with the case you have can be tricky. If you need a mount to have it in the right position, it might be another thing. So if any of that comes into play, then maybe an app alone isn't enough. Also, things to think about when we're looking at that is, how does the child interact with the iPad? How many of you have somebody or have worked with somebody where I know that my iPad, I can go to YouTube and watch my favorite show. I can play my favorite game. And when it's time to work on my communication app, I don't want to. And maybe that's where the throwing comes in, or the stomping. I've been hit with an iPad. I gotta admit, didn't feel really good. Or this other idea of when they maybe do go into their communication app, okay, but maybe they're working on a school related thing. They're on the website for something and they're like, ooh, I want to tell you about something. Now, cognitively, they got to hold that thought, switch over to their communication app, tell you about it. Maybe they needed that visual reference of what it was, and there's this back and forth, right? So that maybe is just a struggle for them, and that could hinder using an iPad only. And then also just kind of, do they need access to email or Google Drive and that sort of thing, and use their communication app freely between all of those things, which I do have individuals who do that wonderfully. Then guess what? Maybe the app on an iPad is the best fit. So we just want to look at all those options. We don't want to like hone somebody in just because we think this is the best fit for them. Let's think about all those different things.
Yeah. And the other thing we always need to think about is, as uncomfortable and taboo as it might feel, is funding sources. And in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to worry about this, but we don't live in that perfect world. And the funding source is a very real factor to consider as we're going through this process. And looking at the funding source before you start a trial or even start down the formal sort of assessment process can really save a lot of headache and heartache in the long run. You know, if you know that a child's insurance will only will cover a speech generating device, then moving towards that dedicated system is a great way to go. But if you know that it won't, you know, some plans, it is written in private insurance, it is written as a plan exclusion, and that just varies from policy to policy, from insurance to insurance. You know, and if that's the case, or even if you're not sure, so if the private insurance doesn't cover it, or you're not sure that it doesn't cover it, you know, then it's better to at least know that before you're trialing a system, and before you get to that funding process where you submit everything to our team, which again we'll talk about in part 5 later on today. And then they come back and our team comes back and says, no, you can't do it. So it's just good to know so that you can look at some other options. There are grants that are available, and we do have some of those listed on like our AAC funding website. But there's donations and other places where you can apply to get a dedicated system funded if that's what you determine to be the most appropriate solution. You know, and one of the other things, as Heather was saying, you know, that it's always, when we're looking at apps versus dedicated systems, sometimes the funding source plays into that, right? Like some families can have an older iPad or can afford that refurbished version with an app, but not a dedicated system. So there's sort of, you know, all of these things kind of overlap and can affect each other. That's why that's the funnel that kind of brings everything down to the bottom.
Right.
But yeah, the funding source is definitely one that you want to just, you want to be able thinking about it from the very beginning, because it will make your life easier as you go through.
We've both worked with families where, you know, for whatever reason, we had gotten to the point of all of a sudden insurance was like, nope, you're not in network, or nope, that particular device is not covered, or that accessory is not covered. And it was like, oh.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Heart wrenching.
Oh, sure.
And then one of the final things that we ask you to consider is how much training is offered to families and teams when they're trialing the device when they've purchased the device, how long after they've purchased the device. If you've got a family who's in the team that's really familiar with the system and they just need a little help to set up or trial, great. Then maybe, that's not the high point on your priority list of things that you need. But if you feel like they're going to have a better outcome with their trial, or this family is going to have questions after they leave the school setting or after they're done at, with their therapy at this particular clinic, and they need someone to go to, that consultant could be someone in their network, some part of their support team, ongoing, that they can reach out to, get updates and trainings like, hey, we've been using this system, but now guess what? My son's in high school and we do want to have a system where he can make his message and send it to school in an email, or he can use a iPad to iMessage his family because all his siblings are texting, iMessaging each other. He wants to be able to do that. It wasn't a consideration we had early on, but we're ready. We need that training. We need to know, how does the device do it? So ask those questions of the consultants and vendors that you're working with. What does that look like? Is there a cap on how many trainings or how many hours? Who actually gets access to that training? We've mentioned before, your PRC Saltillo consultants, you get unlimited training and support for that life of the device. Parents, teams, you move. You can get new training for new team members. You just need a refresher in the fall as school's starting up because the team changed. Great, reach out to us. So have that in mind. Again, it might not be necessary, or it might be, the deciding factor for how well they do.
Mhm. So key takeaways. We really want to just, we'll let you jot those down since we've been talking about them, but just determining those features through that funnel process is really going to help you start to think about matching the system to your trial needs, and prioritizing those features that are most important, right? As Heather said before, you might come out with 7 devices out of your funnel, or maybe you come out with just 1. But if you have those 7, you're going to pick, which one has the most there, because there's no one size fits all for everybody. So we'll give you a minute to jot those down.
And I think a big piece of this is knowing that feature matching. For me, when I first started in AAC, like, what are the features I'm supposed to be matching? And so that's where we wanted to just break this down into those, some of those basic ones that you're going to see over and over again. There are lots of great resources out there to help with feature matching, that'll list different systems and different apps and maybe what features they have. So definitely seek those out. But sometimes just knowing, like, hey, these are what I find important for this individual. Now reach out to your consultant or your vendor and say, do you have a system that does this, that has this feature? And you can go from there too.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be as super specific as I once thought. I was afraid to reach out. Like, I didn't want to sound dumb. So, and with that, we brought our buddy Max back. And so here's just the feature matching for him. You'll notice the top is very similar to what you saw on the set framework for him. We had that low muscle tone. We want to find something that maybe a key guard or a touch guide. We also started to think about, maybe there are button settings or touch settings, like a dwell or a delay, that would maybe help with his activation of the buttons. He doesn't need a mouse or scanning or head tracking or eye tracking, so we just cross those off for right now. You'll see that primary message formulation, 8 to 10 inch screen. A lot of teams, and specifically with Max, that idea of maybe the smaller 8-inch size device, because he's only 10, 4th grade, and might be lighter. But then we were also looking at, we want him to have the buttons be as big as possible, but still have access to enough vocabulary with that key guard. So maybe the 10-inch screen is going to be better. Can't rule out either one yet. Durability, can't stress that one enough for him. He was one that's, stumbling into things, bouncing off walls. Portability, handle or a carrying strap. Most devices have those, but that might be a deciding factor for him. The kickstand or having something built into the device so that it's positioned on the table for him to see. He didn't need a mount or anything like that. Integration wasn't a consideration right now. His insurance wouldn't cover an integrated device. So we noted that we're going to need a dedicated setup. So app-based would not be okay for him. Just the refresher on what his funding sources were. So he had dual coverage with a private and a state Medicaid. The features that his team decided they wanted to prioritize when they're looking at trials. Durability was number one on their list. With that low tone, the falls, the trips, the bumps into things, key. If the system's not going to hold up, then let's rule that out. The second one, core words. He has this great receptive language. He needs access to lots of words, and we want him to be able to create novel utterances. So that was number two. And then that direct select support. So something to help with his accuracy. So that was kind of a reason why we would rule out the iPad only with an app, because durability and access with the key guard wasn't going to be readily available.
Are you there?
Oh, I think they muted.
Okay. And then finally, just some other notes for him is that he's used an iPad at school, but they want to see that smaller size, if that would be better. So we knew 10-inch size was ideal and wanted to make sure that maybe, let's see, is an 8-inch okay? Maybe not. And the higher receptive language. So we want to make sure there's enough vocab there to grow with him into the next phase of life. All right.
Yeah, so now we're going to take a look just quickly. We'll do a quick overview of our solutions, and then we'll kind of go through and do things a little bit more in depth, but we're going to look at both the PRC solutions and or the PRC Saltillo solutions and our several different product lines. So we'll start with the accents.
All right, so with the accent line of devices, in your handouts, you've got something that we call a comparison chart or comparison guide. And so we have this for our accent family of devices. And then Courtney's going to talk about our Saltillo or NovaChat family of devices. But what's nice about something like this, it talks about the different options, and you can use this kind of, I think of, it reminds me of using the ALP for AAC, is we can kind of start circling on here of like, hey, this, this particular one does have what we're looking for. Hey, this one doesn't, and start to use the funnel to branch things down. So across the top, you see on the left is the accent family of devices. The hardware aspect of things, you've got an 8-inch, 10-inch, and 14-inch size device. There's an extreme case that can be added to the product names. You'll hear Accent 1000 is a 10-inch size. Accent 800 is an 8-inch size, not 800-inch. Splash and dust resistant, so that it has that durability we're looking for. It's manufactured, exclusively manufactured tablet, so it's set up for AAC in mind. Then across the hardware there, we have the Prio Mini, which is going to be retiring. So then this winter, you're going to start hearing about our Via Mini. That's an iPad mini based device that is bundled with the durable case, the amplifier on the back there, the app of your choice from PRC Saltillo. And so this one, the option of the Lamp Words for Life app, as well as the Via Pro, which is the bigger 11-inch size iPad Pro bundled as a dedicated device. So durability, again, is a key thing. We have an active and a classic case on it. So if you need more durability, the purplish one you see in the back is that dense EVA foam protecting the case. And then on the very far side, you see the option for that Apple iOS based. I'm going to go buy my own iPad and app. Then we go down the line. the vocabulary files available on the Accent. You have availability of the Unity family of vocabulary files, LAMP Words for Life, Core Scanner, Unidad. There is Essence and Word Power available. So lots of options on the Accent-based devices. On the iPad-based device, you're going to have the LAMP Words for Life app available. So you'll be then limited to that one. So just kind of looking to see if you're going to be looking at Unity, then you're going to want to look at the Accent. But if we're looking at LAMP Words for Life, we can look at both of those. And then it just goes into some more of those technical things, the product training and support, the technical support, alternative access methods. So key guards are available on all of those that we talked about. So we have access to that for Macs, warranty related information, kind of ballpark range of pricing, and whether or not it can be funded through insurance. I did see a question pop up. Is there any talk or thought on pushing Unity onto an iPad? Feedback to our developers is always welcome. I don't know of anything currently, but if it's something that people are asking about, hey, there is a spot on our websites to say, hey, we would love to see this. And they do look at that, the developers look at and see what's being requested out there. And the grid, yes, is in the tools handout. All right. And then Courtney is going to share the NovaChat info.
Yes, so our NovaChat line is we have some overlap between product line there. So our NovaChat and Via Pro and all that and what systems are available. But let me focus first on our NovaChat line. So you can see here the hardware. It is very different from the Accent line of devices. The NovaChat line of devices is built on the Android platform. And in fact, they're built on Samsung tablets. Mostly I believe the 5 is the only one that's not built on a Samsung tablet. But what that means is, it's not a standard tablet that you're going to go and buy out of a store. They are special. They are ordered specially and for NovaChat devices and modified in a manner that makes them that dedicated system on that Android platform. They are splash and dust resistant, similar to the Accent line, and they come in similar and varied sizes like the Accent does. You can see here on the handout that it says that there are devices available in a 5-inch device, an 8-inch device, a 10-inch, and sadly, the NovaChat 12, that 12-inch device was retired back in June. So that one is no longer available for purchase or trial, but instead you have just the 3 sizes. So a 5-inch that looks very much like a cell phone, that 8-inch, and then the 10-inch device. Looking still across that top row at the hardware, if we were to look in that next column, which is the TouchChat Express 8, as Heather mentioned, the Prio Mini will be retiring later on this year. So will the TouchChat Express 8, and that will be being updated with the Via Mini, just that newer iPad-based solution that is bundled with the case and amplifier and whatever else is needed. I'm not going to cover really the Via Pro since Heather already touched on that when she was talking about the Accent line of devices. Instead, I'm going to jump down to that next row on the vocabulary options and talk about the vocabularies that are available on the NovaChat line of devices. So the NovaChat line of devices, there are over 30 vocabulary files available, but the ones that are most popular and most frequently used because they are the most robust systems is what we call the Word Power Suite. And the Word Power Suite has, gosh, I want to say, what is it, 13 files? 15?
I think so, yeah.
Somewhere around there, with different, all of differing grid sizes, but that are supporting word power with the same sort of architecture and principles. It does, as Heather mentioned, word power is also available on an Accent device. It does work a little bit differently between the two systems. So That's just another thing to reach out to your local consultant about if you had questions about the differences between how word power works on a NovaChat and how word power works on an accent. There are reasons to pick either one, but they are very specific. And I think what you will find if you were to, if we were to poll everybody, most people using word power are using word power on a NovaChat system. The one thing that I also wanted to mention is all the way over in that right-hand column is just if you did want to bundle a system for yourself, like Heather mentioned, that the Lamp Words for Life app is available. TouchChat HD with Word Power is an app that is available and can be bundled onto an iPad yourself. Did I miss anything, Heather?
No, I think that was the only thing I was going to pop in was on the Via Pro or the Via Mini. Then you've got the option of either Lamp Words for Life or TouchChat, depending upon your particular needs.
AAC.
Or yes, for our text-based, we have Dialogue AAC. But otherwise, everything else is going to be very similar. All right, so now we're going to play with our funnel. We're going to start out by considering the access method, and we're going to start thinking about our buddy Max again. And so when we found that he had that low tone, but he could isolate his finger when we were watching him access his parents' phone, that's to me one of those aha moments. Like, we don't need 6 big buttons. He can access on his mom's small iPhone how to get into all those things. He's got the ability, right? So to improve accuracy, though, we can add that key guard or that touch guide. Difference is going to be the size of the opening. On a key guard is slightly bigger usually, and a touch guide is going to be a smaller opening. So if you need more support. So I kind of look at it that way, like without a key guard, how does he do? With a key guard, how does he do? Okay, if that's still not enough support, maybe we go to a touch guide. We can also then, we talked about those button timings. Maybe we do a press and hold so that he doesn't accidentally, graze across a button and hit it. So considering all of those. So put all that in here, and that, as we would start figuring out solutions with our PRC and Saltillo devices, the accent, that Prio Mini or TouchChat Express 8, the Via Pro with either Lamp Words for Life or TouchChat and NovaChat all come out in the bottom as it has a key guard or a touch guide available. We can do those touch settings, and they support direct selection. So those are all still in the running, as well as any other systems that you're going, hey, I know this one has this. I know this one I can get a key guard. So we haven't whittled it down too small yet.
Next, we wanted to look at Max's language skills. And if we recall back to what the information we have gathered previously with our different tools and assessments, we know that Max has high receptive language skills, and they're much higher than his ability to express himself. So we want to make sure that whatever system we are selecting for Max has a large amount of vocabulary available, that really robust vocabulary. And another thing that we want to consider and remember is that, we know that he's used low tech or light tech options in the past that had core vocabulary, and he was doing well with that. But that it was limited. But what we want to do is, because we know he was doing well with core vocabularies, we still want to offer him a system that allows him to build on the skills and knowledge that he's already developed in that light tech or low tech system of core vocabulary, but also build those skills out so he can continue using the skills he's developed and build those skills out to increase his expressive vocabulary options. And that would really be the ideal situation, what we were looking for. And so when we're thinking about all of those different systems across the accent line and the NovaChat line and the Via Pro, We know that Saltillo has that word power suite of vocabularies that would meet his language needs. And we've identified several of those vocabulary files as being the most robust and that are the ones that are going to match his need for core words. Anything below word power 42, which you can see here on the slide, would not be based mostly on core words. Those are going to be more phrase-based vocabulary. So you can see we've sort of started to whittle that down a little bit within the NovaChat line. We also know that the TouchChat Express 8, soon to be the VIA Mini and the VIA Pro, and TouchChat with Word Power all have the Word Power suite as well. So we haven't really narrowed out devices yet, but we're starting to narrow in on the vocabulary. If we look then at the PRC Saltillo accent line, then we are looking at Unity, and the Unity family of software would meet his language needs, because we know that there are several vocabulary files within Unity. So Unity 60 and 84, both the one hit and the sequenced versions of that. So there's a Unity 61 hit, there's a Unity 84 one hit, Unity 60 sequenced, and Unity 84 sequenced. Those are both robust vocabulary files. And within that Unity family, there's also the LAMP Words for Life vocabulary, both a one hit and a full version, which offer those robust vocabularies that are core based, that will allow Max the ability to develop those expressive language skills. So it may seem like we still have a lot of options on the table, and we do, but we are starting to put those things through the funnel, at least a little bit.
It's a big table. We're okay. I did see a question come up on difference between the key guard and touch guide. One way I like to look at it, if you've seen pictures of them, key guards typically, and for PRC, Saltillo devices, the Accent, and the NovaChat, it's going to be like a black or white grid, plastic grid that has square cutouts for each of the buttons. So the cutouts are usually a little bit bigger. So it's providing that tactile border around the button, basically, to help guide the finger in to select. And then the touch guide typically is going to be more like a plexiglass, has smaller, more rounded holes, cutouts. And so for that, I often will see if somebody's resting a hand on the screen, that's providing, blocking more of the screen so that I don't accidentally hit things, and really guiding their finger into the hole.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, tickle. You're very welcome. Sorry. So then we're going to look at that durability. We knew that was priority 1, right, for Max. And so we want that durable case to protect the device for any of those bumps and falls. And with that in mind, we started to go, you know what, the old TouchShot Express 8 and Prio Mini cases weren't maybe as durable as the team wanted. So we were able to take those off of the table and look at just the NovaChat Accent line of devices and then the VIA Pro, because they offered that extreme case or those active wraps to add extra durability for him and protect that device a little bit better. The VIA Mini that's coming out, though, that would put that 8-inch size back on the table, because that case is going to be more durable. So just heads up.
just to make it, just to add more balls to your funnel.
I was going to say, yep.
So there are, as we've mentioned, some of those other considerations and things that are still important to think about. Warranty. I think warranty really goes hand in hand with durability. A lot of times, how long is my device going to be under warranty? What is included in my warranty? Those are important things to know, and that can help start to whittle that process down, right? Like if there's definitely not a warranty for an iPad system unless you are purchasing that yourself. So maybe we are leaning on that speech generating device, that dedicated system. Screen size, as we mentioned, there is some overlap between even the PRC Saltillo products. You heard both systems, both product lines have an 8-inch device and a 10-inch device. Other than that, there is some difference. So that can definitely help whittle down your choices as you go through the funnel. Related to that screen size is portability. A system with a larger device screen size, there we go. A system with a larger screen size is probably going to be a heavier device. And depending on your individual, that might be a factor that rules out one device or another, or keeps certain systems in. And again, that training and support that we talked about before. So knowing that Max is in the 4th grade, and, depending on the school system, he might be transferring to a middle school soon, at least within the next 2 years, right? And that, maybe there's going to be some other teams that are going to need some support on their system. So a couple comments popped up in the chat window. So the first one, I'm going to address the latest one. Lighter weight also means less durable. And Heather, feel free to jump in with, I was going to say, yeah, I don't know that that's always the case. For example, our NovaChat 8 line, they're pretty lightweight devices, but super durable. We have very few, screen breaks unless they are direct impacts, and coupled with other features like an active case, pretty durable devices. So I don't know that I would always make the connection or the correlation that a lighter weight device means that it's less durable. Heather, do you have anything to add on that thought?
I was just, the only thing that popped into my head is one of our, rest its soul retired devices, Chat Fusion, tended to be heavier than the NovaChats. But the case was slightly different, and where the protection was lying on it often had more issues. So it was heavier, but not as durable for a lot of individuals.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up too. The other question or the other comment that popped up in the chat window was, is Unidad the only system that supports Spanish speaking families? And the answer to that is no. So Lamp Words for Life has a bilingual version for Spanish and English speakers, and WordPower also has several Espanol files available that very closely mirror the English files in those same configurations for English speaking families. Oh, I knew that was coming when they're Susanna.
That's been a hot topic question like the last month.
At this time, no, not with voice output. So unfortunately, there are a couple of low-tech boards that support, is it Mandarin now or Cantonese? I can't remember.
I believe we have Mandarin. We have a low-tech board for Mandarin. And one thing I like to point out, because there are systems out there that support voice output for these, and just the consideration and why Unity or Lamp Words for Life or WordPower don't have them is that it's not always a direct translation for those buttons or how the sentences are formulated. When we'll talk about how WordPower helps navigate and form sentences, or how our word endings are formed in Unity. There's different rules that apply for those sentence structures, and they don't always translate into that same layout. So there are some systems where it is just a direct translating each button, and there's not that assistance for syntax and your message formulation that some of our systems use. And that is why we can't and don't have all those different languages available, just because if I threw Cantonese on those buttons, it wouldn't necessarily make sense and how the message would be coming out.
Yeah. And I took a quick look, at least on the options that we do have on our website. So there is a Cantonese board and a traditional Chinese
Perfect
core board.
Glad you clarified that one. I had them flipped in my head, so.
Mhm.
Perfect. So we're gonna refer back to that comparison chart. And when we look at that for the accent for Max and the VIA Pro, we can highlight on here. I was saying how, hey, this is where we could circle things and be like, yep, I have this ability. Yep, it can do this. Yep, it can do that. And we can start then seeing, ooh, check that out. The accent line of devices in the VIA Pro looks like it's going to meet more of his needs. Does that mean that Prio Mini couldn't be tried? You know, obviously that it could. But if you're trying to scale things down, funnel things out, it might be good to start with these ones that are popping as having more things met. So the durability factor, the different language systems that we were talking about, we have access to Unity 60 and 84 one-hit and sequenced on the accent, as well as Lamp Words for Life. We have Lamp Words for Life available on the VIA Pro with that durability, so those still stay in the running. And we have those key guards available and touch guides available on both of those. So we can rule out the Prio Mini. We don't have to bring that one in for trying. And now we can maybe focus a little bit more on just the accent. Because we were considering an 8-inch or a 10-inch size device, then we're going to look at the Accent 800, the Accent 1000, and then the VIA Pro is slightly bigger than that 10-inch size. It's 11 inches. So we can still look at it. Weight-wise, they're pretty similar, so that might not be, you know, as big a deal. Software options, we talked about Lamp Words for Life, and then Unity 60 or 84. And I think for Max, we really were focusing more on the sequence versus the one hit. He can start combining. He's doing that with light tech. So let's get him going right away with something robust like a sequenced. As you become more familiar with software that's out there and the different device features, you can start ruling some of these out without trialing them, based on your funding source. There are some funding sources that say, no, you have to hands-on trial X amount of devices. But if that's not an issue, you can start going, oh, you know what? I already know that device doesn't have this. That language system doesn't have what I'm looking for. You can then in your report, which we'll talk about later today, say, I ruled this one out without trying because X, Y, and Z. Until then, definitely get your hands on the devices, try them. There's going to be opportunities, even when I felt like I knew my systems, where I put different ones in front of an individual and they proved me wrong. So, and for Max, we really decided, you know what, let's look at that Accent 1000 with Unity 60 sequenced. I apologize, my blurry picture popped up there for you. That made me a little dizzy. In your tools handout, there is a light tech manual board for the Unity 60 sequenced layout. So if you want to take that out, we're going to play around with this and just give you a little more information about Unity and how we can use that for core word intervention with our trial. Some key things to know about Unity. We mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different configurations available. So when we talked about that vision and motor first, that access piece first, there are lower configurations if it's needed. There are head tracking or eye tracking individuals who maybe do better with those bigger buttons. And so 28 or 36 buttons is going to be a better fit. If we're like, hey, we know he can access those tiny buttons, let's go a little higher. And we can go all the way up to 144 buttons on Unity. The one hit versus sequenced. So if we're not quite there with sequencing and combining phrases, we can start with that one hit. It's not going to switch screens and navigate. So we can start developing this motor plan, which we'll talk about in a second, with that one hit. And then when we're like, hey, you know what, now we're ready to start sequencing, or we're ready to add in those word endings, we can go to that sequenced version. The buttons haven't moved. The words are in the same spot. They've developed this motor automaticity, and we can keep going and building on our language. So just know that those two options are available. With Unity and Lamp Words for Life, the core thing that you're going to hear about is that vocabulary, the language, is learned through motor planning and consistent motor plans. The words are only located in one spot. You are learning how to say a word in one way. You'll often hear it described as we articulate with our mouths, how those sounds and how we form those words, usually in one way, minus dialects and accents, right? But same idea and principle and research around Unity and Lamp-Words for Life is this motor plan, that I'm going to learn this sequence, this motor plan. Another way to think about it, have you ever moved an app on a phone and then you keep reaching for it in the same spot? Or I rearranged my shower and moved my shampoo and my body wash and kept reaching in the wrong spot. Motor planning is a thing, motor memory is a thing. And so we're teaching language through those motor plans. Another key point is you have word finder, so it can help guide you, and you can find where those words are, because we have access to so many words that it's nice then to be able to locate them. And then there's something called vocabulary builder, where we can hide a bunch of words and show them, hey, here's where these words are, we're teaching these words. And then we can unhide them after we're done our teaching so that they have access again. And now they can practice that motor plan, having them in the same spot. So with your light tech board out, and I'm going to go back to that screen in just a second, we want to practice using these core words: go, want, I, feel, more, and play. And I'm going to try really hard to use the highlighter. I know I can. I always struggle with finding it on Zoom though, so forgive me.
I know, where is it?
Oh, spotlight, there it is.
Yeah.
Ta-da. All right. I hope I have it right. Okay, so there we go. There's the red dot. So I is over here in the yellow. You'll notice color coding on a lot of language systems as well. Yellow tends to be like those people, those pronouns. So there's I. Play, I know, was another one on that list. And Courtney, you can yell at me if I'm wrong. Go, thank you. Go is over here. You see a green stoplight for go.
Want.
Want is right under play, which is always nice, like finding things that are nearby. So I want a cookie is the symbol on there. More. I always struggle with more on both systems. There we go. More. And that's when I use the most.
And feel.
And feel. So then I want to use my feeling masks. Now on your system or in the chat window, if you want to chat out, let's think about combinations. So just with this light tech board, we could start doing I feel and maybe start showing different feelings. Or maybe you do want more. What other combinations could we do?
I want, yeah.
Ooh, I want.
Play
I want. Play more. Ooh, play and more. Or maybe I want to play more. Ooh. Feel bad. Yep. And even if it's not on the screen, we can still be modeling it. But guess what? We can do feel bad here. Come play. Ooh, you guys are ready to branch out.
Yes, they are.
I want turn. Ooh, I want, and then turn.
Jessica,
sleep.
Same.
Yes, please.
Same.
Same. More colors. Stop it. Yes. I mean, you got to be able to tell your big brother, stop it. I know, where's coffee? Want drink? Yes, right. And then I would be talking about coffee.
You do it. I love it.
Oh, yeah, you and do and it. So you get the idea. Just with this low tech, light tech system, we can start introducing, we can start practicing. What I like about having the light tech as a starting point or as a modeling tool, laminate these bad boys and you can circle. So now when we're teaching staff and others around us, like, hey, here's words we're going to be targeting right now. We're going to teach these words. focus your day. I'm working on I and want, or I more and stop, more and all done, those kinds of things, and just draw their attention in to those spots. So just some ideas for Unity 60 sequence. And then again, those are going to stay in the same spot when we get onto a high-tech system. We're going to play the same game with our Nova chats.
Yeah, so looking at all of those things that we have put through the funnel, we can start to circle our devices on our little grid here. And same thing that goes for the accent line. Since the Touch Chat Express 8 is retiring shortly, we can kind of cross that one out. But we could possibly, keep it on the list, knowing that the Via Mini is going to be an option soon. If so, we could keep it on there or not. But really, the Nova Chat line is probably where we're going to end up looking at most of our time. And the Via Pro, because we can rule out that iPad-based solution because durability was a high factor and portability was a high factor. So we want to make sure that we're picking a lightweight device that is also durable. The other things that were pretty high on the list in determining, which system we went with was, again, having that key guard or touch guide option be an option that's available for that device. And so those key guards and touch guides are available for the Nova Chat line or that Via Pro line. So that keeps them in the running. And since Word Power is available on all of the Word device families within what we used to call the Saltillo brand, but what is the Nova Chat family and the Via Pro family, since Word Power is available on all of those systems, that's why we still went ahead and kept those in the running. And so looking at that grid now, we know that pretty much that iPad is out, but oh no, you're fine, Heather, go to the next slide. That iPad is out, but what we really want to narrow it down to, again, thinking about the other things that we had in mind, was it an 8-inch, an 8 to 10-inch screen, etc. Our device options are going to be the Nova Chat 8 Active, the Nova Chat 10 Active, and then the Via Pro with the Active Wrap, because that hits a lot of those device durability, portability, screen size issues that we have touched upon so frequently. So those are 3 possible trial devices. If we wanted to further narrow things down, we, after we look at if he does better with like a larger size device, we could rule out that Nova Chat 8 device. We could break it down even further if we're looking at that screen size. Which one does he do better with? Does he really need that larger screen because of the low tone issues? Then possibly that Nova Chat 8 could be ruled out. And that could also be impacted by something like if he does better with more buttons on the screen. So looking at the difference in our software options and our vocabulary options, if he does better with Word Power 60 Basic because it is a more they're both robust, so I don't want to say Word Power 60 Basic is more robust, but it's less button hits with to get to words because you have more words per page. Then given the key guard and low tone issues, maybe that larger screen is something that we still want to continue with. But alternately, you could look at it the same way, like maybe he can, just putting that key guard on there with those bigger buttons, he can do a Nova Chat 8, and we want to rule out the larger size devices because they're going to be heavier and more awkward for him to carry around. So there are ways to, once you get things through that funnel, kind of start whittling down even further. For our purposes today, we're going to take a closer look at the Nova Chat 10 Active with Word Power 60 Basic. And so in your tools and in your handouts, your tool handout, you have this 96 location core board, which is based on Word Power 60 Basic. So take a second and locate that. And we're going to do kind of the same thing we did with the Unity 60, but I want to first cover some of the key points about word power. So similar to Unity vocabulary systems, the word power suite has a number of configurations. So word power goes anywhere from as few as 20 buttons per page all the way up to 140 buttons per page. And there are, even within those files, so like word power 42 and word power 60 also have something called a basic file. So there's word power 60 and there's word power 60 basic, and there are differences between those two files and how they function and how they support the AAC learner. But one thing that is common across all of these vocabulary files, regardless of the number of buttons you have on your page, is that they are all robust vocabulary files, and they are all based on high frequency core vocabulary, which allows individuals to create novel utterances. So the creator of the word power vocabulary suite really focused in on that research of core vocabulary, and really took advantage of looking even more at core and highlighting the words that we use most frequently so that individuals can create those novel utterances. Now, one of the things that differs about the word power suite as opposed to Unity, where Heather was mentioning motor plans and a consistency of learning that motor plan and being able to find that button in the same location every time. Word power instead is more of a predictive system. And so it functions a lot on logical next words, based on the rules of our language and our grammar. What is going to be the next most logical word to occur in the sentence? And that was intentional within the word power vocabularies. The creator wanted individuals to be able to create a grammatical sentence with the fewest number of button pushes possible. So you get that logical next word prediction. You do also have Word Finder available in Word Power on the Nova chats, and that will help you to find words and find where they're located and find what those motor pathways, those word pathways are in order to get to that word. So same thing, we're going to go back to our 96 location board and kind of play the same game. So if we could highlight, yeah, there it is. And so as Heather mentioned, there is that color coding, and look, the pronouns and people are yellow on this board as well. So you've got I over there, and go, want was one, more.
I went too fast. Want and more.
And play. Yep, we got that. And feel was the other one. Yeah. So what are some of the things we can start saying here? And McLeod, we're going to come back to your question. But yeah, if we look at this board, what are some of the things that we can start to say with our word power?
We can still do that. Want more. I want more. I hurt. Ooh.
That was one we couldn't say on the last one just because of the differences. My turn.
Yes.
Go first.
My turn. First and then, yep. One thing I always go back to though, is your student or your child saying first and then, or is this mostly us? My individuals were not saying it. Just wasn't something we targeted. Put in,
I had a couple, right? When we were playing.
I was gonna say I had a couple, but not as many. That's usually what I'm saying to them. I love take and put, yes, and get. Those are some of my favorite core words. I am finished. Ooh, I am finished. We're doing all done. On word power 60 basic, you can do all and done. After you push all, it's done.
Here it was a fun one that came in the chat. I hear it. Do you hear it?
Oh yeah. So far I can't find it.
Oh, it was one row down and to the left.
There we go. I'm like, I know I saw it earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. So lots and lots of just like with that Unity 60 sequenced board, um, you had that available. Yeah, listen to me.
Ooh.
So
Yeah.
there was a question that popped into the chat window about, the last training from a PRC rep that they received indicated that Min Speaker Unity was mostly recommended for individuals with a minimum mental age of 5 years. Is this still true? I have never heard that recommendation.
No.
And I would say no. And I don't know if you were with us earlier when we were in part one, where we were kind of busting some myths. There's a lot of reasons why I would say, and Heather, feel free to jump in, that
Mhm.
no, I wouldn't recommend that. Um, you know, um, so one, we want to start to expose as early as we can with that and get those benefits of early intervention. But then some of those features that Heather mentioned, word finder and vocab builder, those are going to help to what I like to think when I think about vocab builder, I think what it does primarily when it, decreases the number of choices that are showing, it helps to lighten the cognitive load temporarily. I always say vocab builder should never always be on a system, but it definitely can help to focus in attention and on specific words that you want to show. And so with that in mind, I think any individual should be it should be a consideration. We're not going to that's not a limit. That's not a thing.
And I was going to say too, when we're thinking about core vocabulary, and the studies and the research out there did a lot with preschoolers, so under 5, and
Mhm.
those kinds of words. And I can tell you with Unity 60 sequenced as well as Word Power 60 basic, working with 2 and 3 year olds, when we're just working on more and all done or go and stop. And
Yeah.
we have all these other words, we're not making those messages yet, but we can start modeling that and showing them. Um, and build from there. So we don't want to limit in that capacity.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, it kind of goes back to that presumed competence, presumed potential, right? Like we never want to limit somebody because we think they don't meet this minimum requirement. They might not use every single word that's available, but they're still could be a really efficient and functional communicator in their environment because they can use the language that they've learned and been exposed to and been taught. So
Another good
um
question that came up, are there tools that help you guide matching LAMP words for life versus Unity? I don't know tools per se. Sometimes it's the layout. LAMP words for life is only 84 locations. There's one hit and sequence, but it's always going to be 84 locations. So if you did maybe need those slightly bigger buttons, like a 60 location or less, then you're going to look at Unity. Courtney, other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is where it would probably help to just maybe do some more in-depth training on the differences between LAMP Words for Life and Unity, because there are some um, unique differences in the way that words are arranged using the LAMP approach in Words for Life versus how they're arranged in Unity. And I think that what really guides that is your knowledge of that. So if you understand the differences between how those are organized, you can start to see some of the differences. And I think it's, we don't have enough time to go into it in a training like this today. And then similarly, there was another question, Susanna, about how do you differentiate from a student who needs Words for Life for the motor plan versus a student who will benefit from word power? That is the $64,000 question. If we had a really quick and easy answer, that would just make life so much easier. But the unfortunate part, answer to answer your question, is that there really isn't an easy way. I have been in consults before where using all of these tools and trying to sort of feature match and whittle things down, I have gone into that consult and that session saying, I think we're going to we're going to go for a Nova Chat and a word power for X, Y, and Z reasons, right? And I've talked about it with the SLP, and they've gotten input from the family, and I show up and the Nova Chat bombs, right? And I pull out that accent, and that kid is talking and starting to put words together and is just flying through on, a Unity system. So there's really, unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
No, and I was gonna just piggyback on that oftentimes just having both systems, trying both systems, and we've both come across instances where an individual did great on both. They could formulate the same amount of messages, the same amount of words, and then it just came down to sometimes, the training that a team might need more of on one versus the other, just because they were more familiar with one or the other. And I've had both, where a team that was more familiar with Words for Life versus Word Power and vice versa. And so then it came down to, what, the individual did great with either one. And then we're going to go to that next step of, we aren't going to need as much training. We feel comfortable along with the consultant training the family. So we're going to go with, this particular one in this instance. So sometimes just putting both in front of them for trials.
Or even to piggyback on what you said, Heather, is sometimes sometimes training isn't the issue, right? Like instead, then it becomes more about the actual devices. Like then you're looking at the difference between which one's heavier, which one is bigger screen, like there's lots and lots of ways that you can kind of look at things, because there's going to be lots of cases where kids are, especially kids, right? Because they're so pliable, they're so malleable, that they're going to be really successful on either system. And sometimes it's the other stuff that we're looking at.
Totally.
Yeah, Don has hit the nail right on the head too. Like I've done that too, where I'm like, man, the kid is great. He can carry both of them. He's doing great on both of them. And I've literally just put both devices in front of that child and let them pick.
Which one do you like? Yep. I've done that quite a bit. Like, which one do you like? My favorite was when it was because one of their peers had the same device. So again, they did fine with both of them. They rocked both devices, but their peer had this one. Right. So they went with that one. It was kind of cute. Yeah. But there's an opinion, right? Wrapping up in the next couple minutes here, we do want to just point out those next steps. When you've done your feature matching, reach out to the manufacturers of the devices and apps and find out if they have a rep or a consultant that you can reach out to. Sometimes that is one of those factors too, where, hey, we really like this app, but there's not a rep or a consultant to help support it. And we're stuck with that. And that's not going to be good for us. What I mean. So start there, then start getting information about trial devices. Do they have that option? Is there something in your state, which we'll talk about in the next session too? The funding process, the training and the support during the trial, the training and the support after a purchase, all those things we just keep repeating. I know we sound like a broken record, but it really does help you as you go through this process. And then a reminder about our AAC, Explore AAC website that you can get more information to and see pictures of different things. There is a fourth one coming up. That one is going to be trials, data, decisions. Oh my, that's where your brain starts to hurt, right? We've got to decide. So we'll be doing that. And then the fifth part this evening, we'll look at that funding report and that funding process. Thank you everyone for joining us today.